Well, I have a great respect for Mark Faber. I think he's on the ball as far as actually giving some types of hints as to what's going to happen, too, for real. But he seems to be coming up with a more recurring complaint about possibly the wealthiest having their large part of their money taxed or confiscated because the majority will vote it out of their hands. The majority basically will be mad at the 1% and take it away from them by vote. Now, this is probably possible, but I also have to state that here's the facts that he quotes, and he says that in the case of the U.S., the 1% own 43% of financial wealth. 1% of the country in the United States owns 43% of all the financial wealth, whereas 80% of the population just owns 7% of all the financial wealth. So there is a very high concentration of wealth in a few hands. And actually, if you start talking about the 1 basis point, it's probably like far more skewed than that. But this is the thing I would say, a little common sense is nobody works that hard. And it's not just that they work harder and smarter. They're scammers, man. They know. There's a lot of rigged games going on. And quite obviously, everybody knows, like, there's a lot of inside trading. There's a lot of inside information that's known. And electronic trading, there's a lot of ways to cheat. Nobody freaking understands how they're doing it. But, like I talked about, the proprietary software that Goldman Sachs had that this guy Sergey, the Russian immigrant, downloaded. He used to work for Goldman, and they went ballistic. Oh, you can't have that. Gives them a major edge. But there's more to it than that. Because when we talk about the Federal Reserve, it's not federal, It has nothing to do with it. It's as Federal Express, as they say. It's private. Buys up troubled assets. In other words, they make it easy for people to get money. People can't afford stuff. They get upside down. They get it back, the asset back for free. Whereas all the labor that these people, in the form of money, put into that asset, they lost. Gets transferred to the few. So the Federal Reserve, which is actually the private banking cartel, whatever you want to call it, buys up these troubled assets and then they can rent them back to people. That's how the 1% or a tenth of, let's call them the 1 basis point, is staying on top. So if the people actually decide to vote their wealth out of their hands, so be it. But I don't think that's going to happen, to tell you the truth. Because what really happens is it never really gets at the very top people. What happens is it gets at the middle class. It gets at the people in the middle class that are doing well, that actually do work hard. It never gets at the 1%. Never. So I don't know exactly why Mark Faber keeps bringing this subject up all the time, because I don't think they're ever going to touch his wealth. Not in a million years. Because there's always a way around something. And he's got all the advanced knowledge in the world to know what's going on. But if there's actually a backlash against the 1%, it never goes against the 1%. It actually hits that percent between like 60 and 80, the upper middle class, which basically helps out the lower classes more than even the 1% would. Philanthropy done by the 1% is basically show. It's like I steal like 100 million. I donate $1 million. That's what it is. And then I look like a big philanthropist. If they were philanthropists, they'd be broke. They're not philanthropists. It's bullshit. But what I'm saying about this is that it's interesting. He's brought this up so many times, and I've seen this appear over and over again. And I'm saying, why is he so concerned about this? But, there is definitely something wrong when you have that much wealth concentrated in the hands of a few. Because, let me put it this way, the average person will work harder and harder to get more and more. The problem is, there's so much regulation and so much garbage going on, most people can't not even start businesses or get into different things that are established. Like, can you imagine a small company trying to drill for oil or something? That's strictly big business type stuff. But small companies can grow hemp and compete with oil, but that's not allowed. Small companies can't start pharmaceutical ventures. There's too much testing involved. But small groups of individuals or small companies can grow healing plants. So, that's exactly why the 1% are staying on the 1%, or the 1 basis point are staying up there. As a matter of fact, if you go way back to the 1800s, Interstate Commerce Act, basically, where that was passed by? Big railroads to stifle competition. And a lot of times, rules for the EPA and handicap access to companies and what you have to hire for, what you have to do when you hire somebody and all this type of stuff, that actually stifles small businesses. It keeps the 1% in the 1%. So it'd be nice actually if they could actually take a slice out of the 1% and distribute it to the people. I don't think that'll ever happen. And I don't know why Mark Farber gets worried about this, because I think he'll very easily outsmart having any of his wealth taken from him. I think he will. I think he'll be selling gold before there's a problem, before it goes down. He's in the right position now. I guess later on, somebody's going to be buying the gold later on when it's going up through the roof. And I'd imagine it's probably going to be the panicking middle class. With the help of who the hell knows, but that's probably what's going to happen. Somebody's going to be buying it. But, and I figure he'll be selling. I don't think he's ever going to get touched. And I think most of the 1% is not going to get touched. I think who's actually going to have their wealth confiscated the most is going to be the upper middle class, the ones between like 55% and 85%, that type of stuff. And it's not going to. That's just the upper middle class. So I don't know exactly why he keeps bringing this stuff up. It always makes me wonder what he is really saying here, because I can't see where his wealth could ever get touched in a million years. There's so many different ways to hide wealth, and from what I've seen about the wealthiest people, they have a lot of their money in physical assets. They collect art. They have land. It's on a books at cost. They hold it forever. It might generate some kind of income to them as rentals or something. They'll have, they'll have jewelry, gems, and I would not recommend the average person to invest in gems, because the average person doesn't understand the industry. They'll have like rare things, rare furniture, stuff like that. So the average wealthy person kind of knows how to hide money anyway. And there are some actual, I'm digressing, but if I remember right, there's some also ways to do asset swaps where there is no taxation. Like if somebody wants to buy an island in the Mediterranean off of Greece or something like that, there's a way to do an asset swap where you're not getting taxed on a sale or something. It's not like a 1031 like-kind exchange, but there's specialists in this type of stuff. And the 1%, actually I think that's the 1 basis point, not even the 1%, know how to get over. So I don't know why Mark Farber keeps bringing this type of stuff up, because I don't think he'll ever get touched. I think he's too smart and he's got the right people around him that he'll never get touched, as far as getting a large part of his income taken away. But I find that curious that he keeps bringing this subject up all the time. Because I doubt it. But I'd have to point out simple 101 observation. There definitely is something wrong when you have that much wealth concentrated in the hands of a few, because most people, if they knew work harder means more stuff, more money, they will do it as long as they have the opportunity. Most people will. That's what actually spurs the economy. It's freedom of enterprise, laissez-faire capitalism. Problem is we don't have that. We got so many regulations that it's almost like very difficult for smaller entrepreneurs to get started. It's basically, and this has been the problem all along. That is actually, if you look back at the earliest time, the Interstate Commerce Act was actually pushed by the railroad companies, the big railroads back in the 1800s, to stifle competition. They didn't like competition. So most of the regulation, even out there by the EPA, the safety, OSHA, a lot of that stuff is makes it very, very expensive for any business to expand or do anything, because just too much garbage involved. It's too expensive. It's only like the older established businesses that can put up with it, keep absorb the cost, and they've already had those capital outlays to comply with everything they need to. So looks like, I don't know exactly why he's bringing this up so much, because I find it interesting, because this is probably the 10th time he said he was worried about having his wealth confiscated. I don't see how. I don't see how. I don't think it would ever touch the very top people. It never does. It never does. If the people get pissed off, it never touches the very top people. They're too smart.